Hello, this is Natalie Gozzard, SMPS Chapter Service Manager. Thank you so much for joining us today for the 2016 SMPS Chapter Awards Program webinar. We have the Awards Committee and 3 special guests from award-winning chapters attending our program today. We'll be reviewing the criteria for the Chapter President of the Year, or CPY, award, and the Striving for Excellence, SFE, awards program. For SFE, we'll include a review of the Chapter Communications Award criteria and the Chapter Programs Award criteria. Additionally, we plan to provide some reminders and submittal tips for all the awards. We encourage your questions today during our program, and we'll pause 2 times for question and answers. You should see a toolbar on your screen, on the right side of your screen, and you can open and close this toolbar by clicking the arrow. All attendees have been muted, so to pose your question, you have 2 choices. You can click the raise hand icon and we'll unmute you to ask your question, or you can simply type your question within the question box. For any questions that we don't get a chance to address today, we'll follow up with you after the program. This program is being recorded and will be made available and saved within the All Chapter Leaders Community Library of My SMPS. Please know that the Awards Committee and the SMPS staff members are always here for you to answer any of your questions regarding the chapter awards. So let's begin with reviewing the 2016 Striving for Excellence and Chapter President of the Year Committee. We have the SFE Chair from SMPS Philadelphia, Amy Lala, Associate with AAA Mid-Atlantic. The SFE incoming chair this year is Deirdre Gilmore from our Arizona chapter, and Deirdre's president, Tank Girl Marketing. We have our SFE past chair, Bill Reeder from the Michigan chapter. Bill is corporate marketing director at NTH Consultants. Our CPY chair and the 2015 chapter president of the year is Benjamin Sawa from our Boston chapter. Ben is director of marketing at GEI Consultants. Our CPY past chair and 2014 chapter president of the year, Andrea Story, is from our Alaska chapter. Andrea is vice president, marketing and business development, R&M Consultants, Inc. Our chapter delegate is Dawn Greco, and this is Natalie Gozzard, staff liaison. Here's a quick review of our SFE judges. We have 16 SFE judges this year. These individuals submitted their names last summer when the SMPS Call for Volunteers came out. The call goes out every summer from SMPS headquarters, typically in June or July, and individuals interested in serving on a committee can submit their names, and additionally, at that time, specifically request a committee if they have one they're specifically interested in serving on, for example, SFE or CPY. So I'd like to note that we do receive a question or 2 in the past regarding judges who judge in the category in which their chapter submits. And I can share that this does happen, of course, and when this occurs, we instruct all judges to be forthcoming on judging calls and to share their chapter affiliation for transparency. We have 5 CPY judges this year. Always serving on the CPY judging are our past CPY winners from the last 2 years. So we have Andrea Story, CPY winner in 2014, and Ben, CPY winner in 2015. To share some more on the judging process, when award submittals are received as PDFs, they are sent electronically to judges. Judges then judge these PDF submittals only. They don't judge the hard copy submittals. Hard copies are used for display purposes only, such as at PLS and Build Business. Our judges are thoroughly instructed on the judging process and their roles. And remember, the awards committee reviews the process from each year, and we strive to make improvements based on feedback from judges as well as the chapters that submit. We hold a webinar specifically for our judges on the judging process. Section head judges for each category, each award category, are assigned by the committee chairs. And these section heads are responsible for leading judging calls, contacting winners and non-winners, and providing debriefs to chapters if the chapters request them. Typically, all award winners and non-winners are notified by June so that the winners may make preparations for attending conference. This year, Build Business will be held in Philadelphia in August. So today we'll review the SFE and CPY criteria with you and answer any questions you may have. The 2016 awards criteria was provided to all attendees when you registered for the program today. And in addition, the criteria is saved within the All Chapter Leaders community of MySMPS, as well as on the SMPS website under the Recognition tab. In addition to the criteria, we'll touch on submittal requirements. We've done surveys, and the committees have been very thoughtful in reviewing the feedback we've received and making submittal changes and updates with the hopes that more chapters will participate this year and, of course, see the value of participating. So we're here to make things as clear as possible for you and to encourage you to submit. So as I shared previously on our program today, we have the 2016 Awards Committee members and special guests, chapter leaders, who will share the benefits of submitting and how it benefited their chapters. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the program over to our CPY chair and 2015 Chapter President of the Year winner, Ben Sawa of SMPS Boston. Ben?
Yes, thanks, Natalie. Good afternoon, everyone. Or I guess if you're Andrea and you find yourself in the state of Alaska, it's good morning to you. But I think for pretty much everyone here, it's good afternoon. We have a lot to kind of cover here in a short amount of time, so I'm going to get right to some of the major points here that we want to make. Certainly, we're going to spend some time talking about the award itself, some of the logistics behind it, the criteria, the overall schedule. But kind of before going into that, I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about what I think the real value is to just participating in the process itself. Because a lot of times, I think we can find ourselves sort of being caught up in wanting to win, and that's great and everything. But I think to me, and having gone through it and having spoken to other presidents that have both won and lost it over the years, I think there's a lot of value and benefit to be had in just submitting it. So I want to talk a little bit about those different items now. And I think first, I'm speaking to a lot of you that are on the phone. My guess is that you're either current or future leaders of your respective chapters and organizations. Some of you may be current vice presidents. Some of you may on there, maybe you're past presidents. But being a president is sort of a unique experience. I mean, all coupled in one. It's exciting. It's fun. But at the same time, certainly it can be challenging and frustrating and trying, but it's almost always fulfilling. And I think as presidents, when we look back on the year that we had, we look at those challenges and we look at the successes and where maybe we fell short, but maybe where we've also exceeded our expectations. And certainly we can look back and think, wow, we really have grown both personally and professionally. And it can be a very sort of a special time in I think, the president's sort of both professional and personal life. And so the CPY award, I think in many ways, can really serve as a document that begins to encapsulate all those experiences. So in many ways, it can serve as just a really sort of valuable document that they can look back on and reflect and think about, their year. They can show it to their friends and their family and others, and maybe they'll dust it off every couple of years and take a look back and reflect back on what that year was about. So I think first and foremost, it's a really nice thank you. And one of the major pieces that I think is really kind of neat about the award are the letters that people write. So as part of the criteria, which we'll go into here in a second, each award submittal needs three letters of sort of recommendation. And it's within those letters is when you hear from your colleagues, maybe your supervisor, maybe people that were on your committee, where they really talk about the efforts that you did that year, the challenges that you had to overcome, the opportunities that you had and seized upon. And it can be kind of a really cool thing to be able to hear directly back from some of those people. So I think, the document itself can serve as a really nice thank you to your president. I think also, in some ways, it's sort of can be sort of a documented sort of historical preservation of what the chapter did that year. And that can be really key for future presidents, maybe your vice president, but even beyond that, maybe the president is coming in 10 years from now. So they can pick up that document. They can easily see, okay, what did they focus on that year? What were the the financial successes and challenges they had? What sort of educational programs did they drive? What sort of innovative new things did the president do? And again, it can be a really nice roadmap for potential future presidents that can really assist in the succession planning, of your leadership from year to year. And if you are for example, in the Boston chapter, we do it every year regardless. And so we've got now this nice compendium of you know, dozens of years of past submittals that we can all reflect on and look at, you know, as we start the new year. So it's a really nice tool from that perspective as well. And I also want to say, the way that we've structured it this year, and I'll go into a little bit more, we've kind of staggered the due dates, so it gives you a little bit more time if you're also submitting for SFE. If you're on this call now and you're already thinking about it, you still have plenty of time to do the submittal. It can seem a little daunting, but in reality, it's not a lot of work. It's actually kind of fun. It's nice to do. You'll have lots of volunteers that will probably be willing to help you, especially as it comes to writing letters for your president. So I think, again, I strongly suggest that even if you don't feel like you have a chance to win, or, you know, it's not really all about the win. It's really about the process itself, and I think some of those other benefits that I talked about. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more sort of about the criteria and eligibility and other things. So certainly on the eligibility side of it, you know, you have to be a president in the current program year, so that's 2015 to 2016, and all nominations must be made by a current SMPS member. So what to submit in terms of what you're actually submitting is pretty straightforward. It's an awards application, just a one-page application, a PDF of the submittal, as Natalie talked about. You also have to submit a print copy, but we've staggered the dates on that as well, so that's not due until a week after you finish your electronic submission. And again, the judges don't review the print submission; they only review the electronic submission. The print submission is presented at Build Business, and people that attend that conference can then look at it, and it can be shared with others. So as we'll talk about here on the SFE side, I think the due date on that is May 4th. So this is 1 week later. So again, in the past they had been due at the same time, and we got a lot of feedback that became a little difficult for people to manage. So there is a little bit of a break in between the submission dates of both those awards. So on the criteria and scoring, the details are in here, and you can read through them. I won't go through in detail. But really, it's kind of centered around what I'd say sort of our 6 major themes. And the first one is innovative leadership. The second one is member and volunteer engagement. Third one is financial and fiscal responsibility. The fourth one is a leader that's advocated and raised awareness of the chapter overall. The fifth one is progress towards member recruitment and retention. And the last one are the educational programs. You know, did the president develop and oversee, you know, the initiation of new programs or new educational programs along the domains of practice? So, so those are kind of the 6 major groupings of criteria. And the other point that I want to make here is, if you look back at some of the past winners, you know, some of the feedback that we get sometimes as well is that, okay, we're a small chapter, we can't possibly compete with some of the really extra large chapters in terms of the resources they have. But, you know, the way that it's judged and the way that the criteria is based is they don't just look on kind of what you accomplished. They really look at what you accomplished in terms of the size and the resources that you have at your availability. So when you look at some of the past winners, you know, Andrea was in Alaska. We've had people, you know, I think Andrea Kroger won, you know, 10 years ago when she was president of SMPS Maine. So, you know, there's small chapters that can win this award too. So it's not just something that's for the extra large or the very large chapters as well. So it's another point that I wanted to make. So then here on the next slide, just a couple reminders. The submission, again, it's pretty short. I mean, not including the tabs, the letters of support, and the appendix itself. Should total just not more than 5 pages. The reporting time frame is from May 2015 to April 30th, 2016. Again, you have to supply 1 PDF submittal that consists of high quality that can be printed, and then also 1 print copy as well. And then the past winning submittals will be available from download on My SMPS. You guys can actually go there today and look at past winners and download those submittals as well. And then be sure that you abide by all copyright laws as well. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say. Certainly, if you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to talk to you about the process. You know, there are, not to say that winning isn't fun. Winning is certainly fun, and there are a lot of benefits that you get if you win, including, you know, a registration of Build Business, coverages, you know, coverage in both the Marketer magazine and the Quick Look as well. There's an award that comes with it. and then you certainly get a table that you can reserve for your chapter or friends or other colleagues at the event itself. So that's certainly the nice thing that comes with actually winning. But again, I think the real value is in the process itself. I certainly encourage all of the chapters to do that. If you have any questions about it or want to talk to me further, please feel free to reach out to me. So that's all I had, Natalie.
Great. Thank you so much, Ben. Thanks so much for sharing all that information on CPY and certainly for speaking to the value of submitting for CPY. So next up, I'd like to welcome our special guest, Anna Luciano. Anna is the current president of SMPS Boston, and Anna put together SMPS Boston's winning submittal of Ben last year. So the slide I'm sharing right now contains highlights of Boston's winning submittal. So welcome, Anna. I'm going to turn the slide over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Natalie, and Ben. So I wanted to quickly talk a little bit about a couple of additional things that Ben didn't touch on about why we submit for Chapter President of the Year before I talk about some kind of tips I have for a successful submission and process. Ben mentioned the major reason we do the CPY. You know, it's such a great way to thank the President for everything that they've done and really recognize them. But on top of that, if you're submitting the Striving for Excellence Award, it uses so much of the same information that it seems like it would be silly not to do both, quite frankly. So, you know, Striving for Excellence, I know they're going to talk about more later, but it's a great way to recap the entire year. It's an annual report, basically, for what you've done. So I think that's a really important thing to realize. It's not a ton of additional work. If you're going to do one, you may as well do both. But also, the value of it for the President is just immeasurable. So then as far as the process goes and the submission, I think that the most important thing to do is to start as early as you can. If you haven't already started now, start now. At least in terms of talking about who's responsible for doing this, what's the schedule that needs to happen. I think this is similar to any kind of like big awards you'd put together for your company or any big proposal. Who's responsible for what are the pieces that you need, who can do them, and if you break that down pretty quickly, the earlier the better. We do it in the fall in Boston now because we ran into too many years where we were in crunch time in April. So we start early, at least with the schedule and who's putting it together. But yeah, definitely just start now. And then I think it's really important to start figuring out what all the information you need is, rather than trying to track down photos last minute from your events or the PDFs of the flyers. If you don't have a good filing system, create one. Dropbox is great. You know, there's tons of options out there, obviously, but just start trying to pull that stuff together. I think is really helpful. Even before you have an outline for your award, can be fine, or your submission, I guess I should say. Because I think a lot of the times we get ideas based on stuff we find. We're like, here's a flyer for something that we forgot we put out, or here's a photo from a random small event. We should talk a little bit more about this. So pulling that kind of supporting information is great. Then I think that the most important thing for the submission, obviously follow the directions. You know, they have the selection criteria. Most of that stuff can come straight from your Striving for Excellence Award submission. A lot of it, you're just changing it slightly to say how the President contributed to all those things that your chapter's done. But the letters from the letters of support, there's 3 that are required. They speak hugely to the judges. When we got feedback about Ben's award, the #1 thing we heard was these letters were amazing. They were so great to read. And we decided actually for Ben's submission to go kind of above that. We had the 3 letters. We also got quotes from every single board member and integrated them throughout the submission, kind of speaking to each of those, you know, elements of the scoring elements, scoring criteria, excuse me. And I think that all of that worked together to really give a great rounded picture of who Ben is and what a great leader he was for us and how important he was for all of us in like making us all better leaders, making us all better SMPS volunteers, and really moving the chapter forward in a real way. I think being creative about who will write those letters is important. We got tons of offers. Before I even started reaching out to people, people were reaching out to me saying they wanted to write letters for Ben. It was honestly more than we could use. but thinking thoughtfully about who can really tell an interesting story and come from different points of view. We ended up having letters. I think one of our most powerful letters was from a past president who had worked closely with Ben. Another one is from a fellow SMPS president who was president the same year as Ben, and they worked closely together kind of throughout the year, just supporting each other and working together to be the best SMPS presidents they could be, I guess. But they're really powerful letters, and I think being creative, thoughtful about who those are from goes really far. And then the kind of last piece that I wanted to mention is, you do have room for an appendix, and I think there's a lot of stuff that can go in there that, again, gives a more well-rounded vision of who this person really is. So for us, we included all of the blog posts that Ben wrote for the SMPS Boston blog. There were some letters that he'd sent out from, or emails he'd sent out to the board and stuff like that, photos of him at events, flyers from programs that he had been active in creating and launching. And I think they speak really highly. They're great supporting information to, talk about, they're great support documents to illustrate what you talk about in your text. But it says a lot, basically. And I think the whole point is to show this, well-rounded, great image of who this leader is to you and what he's meant to you and your chapter. I think at the end of the day, we all know volunteering for SMPS is really rewarding, but it's also a lot of work. And recognizing the president for everything that they've done is just, it seems to me like it's the right thing to do, and it's definitely the right thing for us to do for Ben. So I hope you all submit your presidents. I know they'll appreciate it a lot, and I know that it'll make you feel good at the end of the day, too. So that's really all I have to say about that. Natalie, I'll kick it back to you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Anna. Boston truly put together a really wonderful submittal last year. So thank you so much for sharing your tips on how you pulled that together. So reminder to everyone, you can review previous winning submittals in the All Chapter Leaders community of My SMPS. I encourage you to drop into the community and review Boston's submittal for Ben. There's some really great stuff there. So thanks again to both Ben and Anna for joining us today, and they're going to stay on the line if you have any specific questions. At this time, I'm going to open it up for some questions and answers. Again, attendees, you can submit your questions through the question box, or you can just press the raise hand icon located next to your name in the attendee panel box, and I will unmute you. I do have a couple questions that have come through. Someone is asking if today's slides will be sent out to all the attendees. The slides will be made available within the All Chapter Leaders community of My SMPS in the awards folder. They'll be saved along with this program recording so that you may share with your board or access at a later time. We have another question. An attendee is asking, is there a limit of letters of support that can be sent for chapter presidents, or is it, for example, the more the merrier? Well, I'm sure that it would be hard to, it is, as Anna mentioned, it's challenging to nail it down just to 3. However, the criteria does state that no more than 3 letters of support for Chapter President of the Year will be accepted. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions at this time, so we'll take some questions again at the end of the program. At this time, we're going to explore the Striving for Excellence Awards now. And I'm going to turn this portion of the program over to our chair, Amy Lala. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Natalie. It's great to be here today. I've been involved in this committee for quite some time, so my approach to going through the SFE and its criteria is really to go over some of the things that I've learned along the way, give you some hints and tips that I've learned in judging and what the judges are looking for, and just kind of try to provide some answers to those questions that no one has typed in yet. All right, so Natalie, where are we starting? All right, eligibility. All the chapters are eligible. And everyone, as Ben already mentioned, this document provides a really great history and kind of a time capsule for your year as a chapter. So it's a really great resource for everybody going forward to kind of prevent anybody from reinventing the wheel. So it's just a great opportunity to kind of encapsulate all of those things that you've talked about throughout the year, and it's, you know, a good opportunity to get it all down on paper. All right. And next, we've got what to submit. This is pretty much the same as what Ben already mentioned for Chapter of the Year Award. We did change it up a little bit and give everybody an extra week to submit the print copy versus getting the PDF copy. And as Ben already mentioned, the judges are going to be reviewing the PDF copy, and the print copy is going to be displayed at Build Business. So just something to keep in mind as you're pulling everything together. One other thing that we're going to be, that was a change this year, and we will talk about this later, the judges have been given 5 discretionary points to deduct for typos, grammar, and other errors that we find in the submissions. We're all marketing professionals. We've all put together proposals before for our employers. We need that same level of detail and expect that same level of detail in this submission as well. So you wouldn't submit a proposal without proofreading it. Please don't submit SFE without proofreading it as well. All right, on to the next one, our criteria review. So the first criteria that we look at is for programs and education. And for this particular thing, you're looking at all of these bullet points of what you need to submit. Keep in mind, every year your chapter has to put together an education report. Most of the information that's required in this criteria can be found in that education report. No need to reinvent the wheel, like I already said. Go back to that. Use the information that you have on hand and leverage it. You've got this reference material. Use it to put together this and make this such an easier process than everyone has in their head than it actually is. All right, next criteria is leadership and chapter management. Again, like Ben and I already mentioned, this is a great way to codify your process and your goals. What did you guys talk about? If your chapter has a retreat before the year begins, what did you talk about? What are the minutes from that when you talked about what you wanted to achieve this year? Go back to those minutes from those meetings and figure out what you said your process was going to be and what you said your goals were going to be for the year. And then as you put it into the criteria and into this particular document, it's something you'll be able to carry forward and use as a guide for years to come. A lot of people, when they do their planning at the beginning of the year, actually use this document as a checklist. It's a great way to kind of plan your year, but use that and then you have it going forward. It's a great starting point for your chapter. All right, and the next criteria we have is membership. How does your chapter retain their members year over year? How do you recruit your members year over year, your new members? What benefits do you offer your membership? Do you have a special rate for them? Do you have special events for them? These are all of the things you need to answer in order to gain all the points for this particular category. And as far as mentoring goes, you've got a ton of people looking for mentors in your group. I know some chapters have ambassador programs, and so you're just using different words for what essentially is the same thing. You know, when you have your events, do you put gold stars on the name tags so people know who the new members are? What system are you using to connect prospective members with existing members? What resources are you using to connect your new members with your seasoned members? These are all things that I'm sure you're already doing, and will all answer all of the criteria in this particular category. All right, communications is next. And this is the same sort of thing. What methods is your chapter using that's been successful to communicate with members and to get more people in there? You know, do you have metrics to show what's been the most successful? You know, why are you using social media versus email blasts? Explain that. Explain your choices of using one over the other and have your metrics to show this. We're all using email systems. We're all using social media. Those metrics are right at our fingertips, and some of them are really robust. So take the information that's right at your fingertips and use that to plug in the bullet points that you see in front of you from here. And if you're not using all of the things that are on here, tell us why not. Maybe you've had such an incredible success with your email blast that you've kind of tapered off a little bit with social media. Explain that. Just say, hey, we've got these amazing metrics, and so we kind of held off a little bit. It's what we heard from our members. If you had sent a survey out asking members what their preferred way of receiving information was, mention that. That's huge. It's huge. And then with social media specifically, how social are you being on social media? It's called social media for a reason. What are you getting feedback from that? Are you using social media as a feedback tool versus surveys? Are you asking questions online and getting responses? Put that in too. That's great feedback as well. Particularly with this category, I see amazing opportunities, and I have seen amazing graphics in the appendices that are allowed for this. Use your graphics that you can get from these particular things. There's graphs that you can, screenshot and things for what your engagement is, for what your hit rate is. This is a great way to really kind of break up the text and actually show in a very vibrant way what you're particularly doing. The judges really take, in my experience, take personal interest in this section, and I know for a fact that, when it's cited that we used our Twitter for such and such, we'll go back and we will go and we will look at your Twitter. If you mention that you did something to your website, we're going to go to your website and look at that. So keep in mind that when you cite a source, the judges will very often take it upon themselves to go back and visit that source to kind of see what you've done and take your submission up to the next level. All right, next. Financial health. Once again, National HQ, requires you to put together a financial report every year for them for your chapter. Use that resource and use that material to answer the bullets that you see here. Regarding sponsorship, talk about how you created success for your chapter. It's not necessarily who had the most sponsorship dollars at the end of the year. It's how you created success. Maybe you had to revamp your entire system so that you were a flat rate for your one whole sponsorship level, but it doubled the amount of firms that participated. That's another way to show sponsorship success. Did you increase the amount of money at the end of the day? Maybe not. Maybe you were flat from the year before, but you doubled the engagement of firms, and that's huge too. So make sure that you look at it in a different way. It's not just about the dollars, it's also about volunteer hours. How were you engaged in the community? Leverage those man hours as well as part of your financial health. You donated X dollars in kind, or you donated services in kind to a college group or a nonprofit, things like that. Those things count toward your financial goals as well. All right, and then finally, our reminders. Keep in mind your reporting period doesn't always necessarily line up with our term years, so there's going to be a little bit of overlap for the information. You might have to go back to last year's education report and last year's financial report to find some of the reporting information for this particular submission. Again, we talked about the PDF versus the print copy. Huge, huge, huge. The next bullet. Address all of the items and all of the bullets for all of the categories. If you haven't addressed it, don't skip it. Tell us why you're not focused on it this year. You may have a perfectly good reason why you're not focusing on mentorship. Maybe you're focusing on retention instead. So always tell us the method behind the madness as to why you're focusing on one particular goal and maybe bypassing another. We will take that into consideration. It's not necessarily it's not going to count against you if you give us an excellent explanation as to why your chapter chose not to address it this year. I mean, in financials, you might have a very healthy backlog, so you decided not to focus on increasing sponsorship this year. Whatever, but just make sure that you address all the bullets that are put in front of you. And again, as Natalie said earlier, all of us are available, and HQ is available to help with data for membership. So reach out to Natalie and the staff there. They'll help you with that, and all of the rest of us are available to help you with any questions you have as well. One more slide of reminders. The submittal tips, those are on the criteria sheets. Make sure you check those. Definitely check the past submittals for inspiration. Review and spell check, like I said, we have that 5 points that we will deduct for spelling and grammar errors if we find them, but I'm hoping that this year we won't find them. Also remember to abide by copyright laws. This is with photos and particular graphics. If you're pulling graphics from Twitter, say that you pulled the graphics from Twitter. Just take care of that for us too. I know I kind of breezed through this really fast. I will be here at the end if there's any questions. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Natalie.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy. Really great info, very helpful, and I love the examples you provided for each section. I think that's going to be very helpful for folks. So thank you very much, Amy. At this time, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to SMPS Maryland past president, Caitlin Nato. Maryland chapter won SFE Grand Prize honor last year, and we've invited Caitlin to join us today to share her experience of submitting for the Maryland chapter. Welcome, Caitlin.
Hi, Natalie. Thank you for inviting me to join you all today. I'm Caitlin Eto, past president of the Maryland chapter, and I've been on the Maryland board since 2010, and back then we were really struggling to keep our board engaged. We were losing members. We had almost no money in the bank, and through those early rebuilding years when I was on the board, we decided to start submitting for SFE, even without much hope that we would win, but because we were really looking for a structure to guide our approach to becoming a larger, more successful chapter. And that first year was a huge effort. I know there's been a lot of talk about it being an easy process, but the first time you do it, it's definitely an effort. So we learned a lot, and it immediately started to shape major changes in how we organized ourselves, managed our information, developed different programs and initiatives, and we have grown so much since we started submitting back then. And we've increased our membership, made major strategic changes to our programming, and we are financially stable and are able to give more and more back to our members, which I think is one of the biggest takeaways that we've gotten from this process. So I've been intimately involved in submitting each of the years that we have. So I thought I'd share a little bit about what we've learned as a chapter and some of the takeaways that we've gotten from debriefs, both successful and unsuccessful. So some of this I know Amy and Anna also touched on a little bit, but without it being too redundant, I think one of the most important things is to obviously plan your year with submitting for SFE in mind. So from that initial board planning session, start talking about it and figure out how you're going to approach it. Set up templates for all directors to use to capture information and data throughout the year so that you don't end up with as much of a crunch effort at the end. I think Anna mentioned it, but create a shared Dropbox or other file sharing platform that everyone can dump photographs and files and everything into, and you can figure out how to organize it later. But getting all of the information into one location can sometimes be a big hurdle to overcome. One of the other things I think we've learned, we've gone different ways on this, but our biggest takeaway is not to overthink your theme. I know that there's some really creative themes that are out there. We've gone on the really wild side of a theme, and we've gone on the much more simple side. And I think what we learned is to really focus on the content, know what our story is, but keep the graphics clean and simple, and just make sure that you have somebody who can help set up templates for the graphic part of it as early as possible, but really keep it simple. I think one of the other things we learned is to really use metrics to tell your story and keep the text brief. The page limits help with that, kind of forces you to be brief. but I think if you can even use most of that page real estate for graphs and other statistics and call-outs, it really makes it a lot easier for judges to read and get a quick takeaway of what your story is. We also, through the process, began to leverage non-board members. Through the years, it really was becoming a burden for each of the directors to have to take on the added effort of pulling it together. So we really looked to past presidents, senior members, to help with content, to help with review, and that has really been a game changer for us in what we're able to get done without taking away from the rest of what the board should be focused on. I think Amy mentioned this, but we definitely learned to not avoid areas where we were weak. I think it's easy to do in how you respond, but if you aren't doing something, explain why, explain what your barriers are, what your plan is, or at least just acknowledge that it's not something you're doing and you have a goal to do it at some point. That really changed for us how we were evaluated for some of the things that as we were growing and maybe didn't have as much of the resources to dedicate to certain programs or initiatives, it still is communicated in some way to the judges why that was. It can be easy, but you should expect a major crunch at the end, and I think we learned, as much as we tried to keep it a group effort and a collaborative process, to really dedicate one single person who is ultimately responsible for the final package, so that there's no missing information, no holes, no spelling errors, those little things. And I guess last is just not to leave out the people. Remember that it's all about your members, so make sure there's great photographs of people, quotes from your members, other stories that are real, and give everybody else an understanding of what it's like to be a member in your chapter, to go to events in your chapter, to be on your board, all of those things. So I hope those lessons are helpful to everybody. I can't stress how much it has meant to the Maryland chapter to go through the process year after year, and we could not have been more honored to win the grand prize this past year. So good luck to everybody, and I'm here to answer any questions that people have.
Wonderful. Thanks, Caitlin. Congratulations again on Maryland's win, and thank you certainly for sharing your experience of submitting for SFE and the how-to tips that you provided. Very helpful. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to turn the program over to St. Louis's past president, Amanda Payne. SMPS St. Louis won the SFE first place honor in the medium chapter category last year. So welcome, Amanda.
Thank you, Natalie. And once again, my name is Amanda Payne. I am the past president for SMPS St. Louis chapter. And Natalie has asked me today to talk a little bit about, you know, how our chapter, because we have in the past 8 years, I think we've won our SFE for medium chapter 5 times. So so we have been very successful. But the interesting thing is we actually didn't start submitting for SFE until 2008. At that time, our president at the time, Stacy Robin, had thought, since we never had submitted, that it would be a good idea for our chapter to take it upon itself to get a little bit more organized and look at the details that go into a submittal for SFE, and to see how well we do and how well we rank. And so the first year, you know, submitting, it was a lot of work. It took a lot of work on the board, but as both Amy and Caitlin had mentioned, it's amazing when you get an SFE submittal together. yes, it takes a lot of work, but it really gets your chapter so much more organized in finding the facts. And so since then, we've been very successful. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we at St. Louis gather our information for SFE, what our focus is, the benefits, and then our processes and rewards. So we start off with holding each director on your board accountable. So, there are different it's a 12-page submittal, but then you have an appendix that you can have up to 30 pages. So, we go to each director, the programs and education directors and special events directors, and then the president and the past president and the president-elect work together for the leadership and chapter management. The membership director, they're accountable for their section. Communication is the same. And the secretary helps out the communications director because the secretary does have some part with, the mailings and the marketing materials and prints. And then the financial health section usually is the sponsorship director, the treasurer, and then the president does help out as well. So in St. Louis, the past president actually gathers all the information at the end and puts the submittal together. However, it is a team effort, and so we have basically a template that we send out each director during the planning retreat at the beginning of the year, and it basically holds all this information in regards to SFE criteria. And so throughout the year, that director is, they're a part of their job is to make sure that they document this information that will go into SFE. And, our focus for SFE is typically, it revolves around the president's theme for the year. So like last year, my theme was to lead and inspire. That's what I had wanted my board to kind of focus on throughout the year. So as you see in on the screen in front of you, our cover for SFE was I asked the board to submit items that inspired them. And so as you can see on the left-hand side, there's a picture of my two children because they're my inspiration for life. And so just it kind of molded together this kind of creative cover. Somebody loved music on the board, so that was their inspiration. As you can see on the right-hand side, our special events director, her inspiration was helping children with cancer. So it's amazing when you kind of open it up and include everybody on the board what the outcome can be, and it can really be a very creative outlook and a great theme to hold your SFE submittal for. The other thing is, once you kind of get your focus and start gathering your information, and like Amy had mentioned too, you definitely want to work on getting that information early on in the process. You don't want to wait last minute, but once you kind of usually by March to early April in our chapter, the past president asks that all the information for SFE is submitted to them. So all these, the different chapter goals and, the training and, we want to know the member retention rate for membership and all that sort. The past president gathers that information and then basically comes up with a draft. And like Caitlin said, it's very important to make sure that you have a lot of graphics in your submittal. A lot of writing, it's no different than really a proposal. But, if you have all writing, it can get a little lengthy and nobody really cares to read through all that information. So if you can, make sure you include graphs and charts and different numbers and call outs and quotes. It really starts to mold together a very nice submittal, and it's also easier for the judges to be able to review. And basically, once you have your submittal and you basically submit, the feedback, one of the benefits from doing SFE for your chapter, the feedback is amazing. One, SFE alone keeps your chapter very organized. It is basically a nice reference for all of your years in the past and for the future, for your future submittals. And it showcases your chapter's successes. So the other benefit for submitting is you get to hear the feedback from the judges, and it's just a great learning tool for your chapter for the future. It gives your chapter an opportunity to see your strengths and what you're kind of doing right, but it also shows your weaknesses as well, and maybe what your chapter could improve on and areas that maybe you should focus on in the future. And that helps give your president-elect at the time maybe something for them to be able to strive for in their presidency. So between that and then just the whole process in itself, and then you get these great rewards too. If if you do win SFE, it's a great accomplishment not only for the chapter in itself and the board, but the members as well, to be able to go back and show your members, this amazing award you get during Build Business, that the president gets to go up on stage and accept an award. The chapter gets a, for us, because we were a medium chapter, we got a $250 cash prize. You get a free registration at Build Business, and then you get coverage for your chapter in the Marketer and the Marketer Quick Look. So it's not only is it just a great organization tool, like I just mentioned, but it really can have its benefits too for the chapter and the chapter's future. So I hope I was a little helpful today on my information. If you do have any questions, I will be on until the end, so feel free to ask me anything. And Natalie, I think I'll let you take it from there.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda. Congratulations again to St. Louis for winning last year and the year before. Really appreciate what you shared with us on St. Louis's submittal process, and I love the fact that you all have a focused process that guides your creativity in the submittals. How wonderful. So thank you again, Amanda. So attendees, I hope we're inspiring you to submit for CPY and SFE this year. And if you haven't submitted before, or if circumstances may prevent you from submitting your chapter for SFE this year, the committee and I would like to encourage you to consider submitting your perhaps chapter website, newsletter, social media efforts, your programs, and our special events for awards. So we know all chapters are doing exciting and wonderful things, and you're holding super creative and successful events and programs to service the members. So I'd like to now welcome SFE committee member, our past chair, Bill Reeder, to share more information with you on submitting your chapter for a Chapter Communications Award. Bill?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Natalie. Good afternoon. I wanted to start out by saying that I've been involved with the SFE program either as a judge or a committee member for a number of years now, and I think it's a great program, not only for its ability to recognize the hard work of SMPS's chapters and their members, but it also provides this great framework that everyone's talking about for running a successful chapter, and I'm really glad to be part of it again this year. So let's talk about the Chapter Communication Awards, which covers newsletter, social media, and website submissions. First, our Communication Awards judges want to see a separate section that clearly identifies your chapter's objectives related to your newsletter, website, or social media program. Next, your objective section will be followed by a summary section, which is divided into 3 parts. You'll want to describe if your objectives were achieved, and if so, how they were achieved. You should be specific here, and the better you can demonstrate how you met your objectives, the easier it will be for judges to see your successes. Next, you'll want to address the financial performance. You should describe the budget you laid out for this program, as well as the actual expenditures and how they compare. And finally, you'll want to describe the program with as much detail as necessary to make your point. If you have a newsletter submittal, for example, you'll want to include things like how often it's distributed. If you're submitting on a social media program, you'll want to include things like how you use the various platforms and how often you use them. And here's a secret for everyone who is joining us on this call today. This is a relatively new category, social media. Not much competition here. Your chances of winning are really good if you submit in this category, so keep that in mind. If you're submitting on a website program, you'll want to include a description of the various aspects of the website along with how frequently the site is updated. And just some reminders. You'll be submitting electronically one high-quality print-ready PDF, and you'll be physically mailing in one printed copy. The addenda, if you have one, is limited to 30 pages. You'll want to also remember to make the judge's job easy by clearly demonstrating how and why your program was effective. As always, be sure to use your approved chapter logo. And finally, it's always helpful to review and download past winning submittals in the All Chapters Leader community on the My SMPS website. So that's all I have. Good luck to everyone. Natalie, back to you.
Excellent. Thanks so much for walking us through the communications criteria, Bill. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you. Now I'd like to welcome and invite Awards Committee member Deirdre Gilmore, our incoming SFE chair for next year. Deirdre is going to provide us some information and insights on the chapter program awards.
Hi, everybody. Hi, this is Deirdre Gilmore. I was Arizona president 2013-2014 year. And that was actually the first year in 7 years we had done an SFE. And I just want to reiterate everything everyone said is even if you're not in it to win it, it's such a great experience to go through. So I really encourage you to do that. However, sometimes you're just not having the best year, but you have one or two really amazing things you want to highlight. And this is really where the Chapter Programs Award comes in, where you can take something, one great idea that you had and executed well and highlight it. And so and this is also kind of a good toe in the water type of experience. So let's talk a little bit about the differences between the two and that judging criteria. So first of all, a special event. Again, as it says, it's a holiday function, a charitable event, social gatherings that aren't necessarily educational but could be used as recruiting tools and that networking component that is so important to our organization. And really, I think the key thing on this side of the two awards is this is really about creativity. It's if you look at the criteria here, it's what was the planning and inspiration? How did you promote it? What was the marketing behind it? And this was such a fun category to judge last year to see the amazing things different chapters are doing. But again, I kind of feel like the last person on a round table where I don't want to reiterate everything everyone just said. But I am going to a little bit here. So again, it's really important to address every single category you're seeing here. There's 4 areas we want to see on both sides, and it's incredibly important that you discuss those. The educational program, it's exactly what it says. It's an educational program, so that's more of a seminar, a workshop, some training that you put on, and this is much more of that measurable stuff where we want to hear about what domains of practice did you hit, how many educational credits did you provide, what were your surveys, what were your evaluation scores on this. So it's a much more measurable type of event, maybe not always as creative, but definitely education is one of our #1 pillars, and so it's so important. And I know you guys are doing great things out there. One area I really want to address is that very last bullet that says sponsors and dollar amount generated. And I think a lot of times people get hung up on thinking if I didn't raise $50,000 and this wasn't a worthy event. And I really want to reiterate that there might be a reason why you didn't raise a ton of money. Maybe this was a giving back. And so you need to go back to your objectives and make sure that your objectives are clearly stated and tied down to that whatever that sponsor and dollar amount generated is, because maybe your goal was not to make a ton of money, maybe it was to give back. So you just have to be really clear in communicating that. And then one of the things I learned in doing this SFE one year is that I wasn't really savvy about totaling all the in-kind sponsorships I had gotten from my events, and make sure that you're keeping an eye on that and including that in those dollar amounts. It's incredibly important. So moving on to reminders. Again, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, so I'm gonna go over this a little bit briefly. One of the conversations my group had in this submittal was that just like a proposal, you have to remember that you have different audience members. And there was a really interesting discussion between those of us that are more on the marketing side and really want to have that cool theme and really, you know, make everything shine and every part of it and have a real design-heavy submittal. And the BD people were like, I just want to see the details. I just want to see the facts. I don't really care how pretty this is. Either way, keep in mind, everything matters. You have to address all the criteria in the order it's asked, 0 typos. But remember, there's less emphasis on the prettiness of your submittal as opposed to the content, and be aware of those multiple reviewers. You know, have good graphics and statistics to explain as opposed to real text heavy to hit as scanners. Again, clearly state your event and program goals and objectives. One of the things that was really hard last year in judging were it's sometimes nebulous when people were saying what their objectives were. It's like, oh, well, we just wanted more participation or more engagement. I can't measure more, but I can measure 50%. I can measure 10%, things like that. So make sure that when you're setting out your goals and objectives, you're giving us something to measure the end results to. Again, be sure to include the why. Just like a proposal, as you're talking about whatever great thing you did, make sure that you include the so what factor. You know, what was in it for those people? What did they get out of it? Don't just give me the data of what you did, but give me what the people got out of it. Why? And also, in coming back to that, you know, this is one of those that the appendix becomes incredibly important. You know, showing how you promoted what were your communications? What handouts did you use? Just showing a bunch of photos of the event is great, but again, that doesn't tell me the whole story. So make sure, you know, you only have a couple pages to give your content, but you have that big back end to really tell the story of that event, your creativity, all of that, and make sure that it's readable in that PDF, because again, all of us judges are judging from the PDF. Okay, next slide, please, Natalie. When we talk about statistics and our graphics to measure event program goals, again, this is one of the biggest discussion areas that we had in judging last year. Was it's really hard to measure something if there aren't numbers to it. We have to have something. Again, on the education side, you know, if you're not getting survey results out from every one of your programs, start now. It's super helpful. Again, if you have your educational report that's submitted to headquarters, that can be really helpful because a lot of that information is stored there. However, those reports are submitted in September, so everything you've done from September to now is not going to be in those reports, so you might have to do a little more judging, a little more tracking down to find that information. Past winning submittals, we cannot recommend enough that you go and look at past submittals. I think it gives you a great idea on how to put this together, you know, because sometimes if you're new to it, it's just the whole logistics of how does this thing work. So that's really helpful. And also, if you decide not to submit this year, you might get some really great ideas for next year in your chapter. So there's so many great things in that archive there. And since we're already past 2 o'clock, I'm going to start to wrap this up. But more than anything, just know that all of us are here to help you. We want you to have a very successful submittal process as well as win. So if you're stuck, if you're just not sure what to do, you know, please don't hesitate to reach out. There's so many of us here that want to help you win this special award. And I'm going to wrap it up from there.
Well said. Thank you very much, Deirdre. Very, very informative. Well, we are going to move on to our last question and answer section. So again, please feel free to press the raise hand icon and I will unmute you, or you can push your question to me through the box. I do have a couple questions coming through. The first question is someone would like for us to confirm that the SFE and CPY submittals are not going to be viewed by the judges. So the question is, do they not require special bindings? And that's true. The hard copy submittals will only be used. We display them at PLS, for example, our Presidential Leadership Symposium for the President-elects, and we also display them at Build Business. So it's really the choice of the chapter, how they'd like to present their submittal. It's not required to be in any special kind of binding. It's not stated anywhere in the criteria. The next question is, how can we leverage events that occur after the SFE deadline? So looking at this question, I believe they're asking, for example, if there's a program that's going to be happening in June or summer. Again, I know one of the committee members had mentioned that the SFE and CPY reporting time periods do not coincide with the SMPS program year. So I can recommend, and I believe Deirdre touched on this, that if you include the program as it's coming up, if you include the plans in your submittal and you share what your preparation is, we would encourage you to include the why you plan on doing this, and perhaps add what is the need of your chapter to be doing this. And I'm not seeing any other questions at this time. And again, feel free to email me or any members of the committee if you do have questions. So at this time, as shared by our committee members and special guests, here are a few quick tips on the slide for you that bear repeating. Again, treat your submittal like a proposal. Follow the directions. Articulate the objectives and address how your chapter met them and the results. By all means, please feel free to use metrics, analytics to determine your results. Again, remember that you have up to 30 pages of addenda that you can include. This would be a great area to include these results. And again, be clear, concise, and convincing. Here's a list of resources available for you when you're pulling together info for your submittals. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can visit the All Chapter Leaders community of MySMPS to view previous chapter education reports, past and current membership statistical reports, and of course previous winning SFE and CPY entries. And please do feel free to reach out to the committee members and any member of the SMPS staff with any assistance that you might need. And drum roll, please. I know Ben walked us quickly through the CPY prizes. Again, CPY winner will receive a Build Business registration, coverage in the Marketer and Marketer Quick Look, a CPY crystal, and a reserve table at the 2016 Awards Gala at Build Business. This will be held this year in Philadelphia. An SFE Grand Prize wins $800 cash, 3 SMPS Annual Conference Build Business registrations, coverage in the Marketer and Marketer Quick Look, and a reserve table at the Awards Gala. There will be 3 first-place awards awarded. Those chapters will receive $250 in cash, 1 Build Business registration, coverage in Marketer and Marketer Quick Look. And we also have outstanding awards, and up to 8 are awarded each year, and these chapters will receive recognition at the Awards Gala and coverage in the Marketer and Marketer Quick Look. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today, especially the wonderful SFE and CPY committee members and our special guests. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And to all attendees, we hope that you'll consider submitting your chapter and or your chapter president this year. And we know you're all doing wonderful things at the chapter level, and you all deserve recognition. Thank you very much for joining us, and this ends the Chapter Awards webinar. Thank you.